Good day, everyone. How are you today? I am Hilary Colleen Holdiam, your presenter for today's video. I will be talking about the first four module under Unit 1 of Acuña Andresito's Philosophical Analysis 7th edition, Advanced Techniques for Critical Thinking, or simply this book. To start off, I want to ask you what comes in your mind when you hear the words word and concept. Write it down, and I hope that by the end of this video, you will be able to distinguish the difference between the two. First, we have words. Words is this unit of communication which is used as a sign of a concept and is made up of letters. It is true that words are indispensable means of communication. We use it in our daily lives, especially when conversing with other people, or even typing out, writing out, or voicing out our thoughts. Words are even made whenever we think. Without words, there will be no concepts. Without concepts, there will be no knowledge claims. Without knowledge claims, there will be no argument. To put things in simpler terms, without words, we won't function. However, on the other hand, we have concepts. It is a basic unit of analysis and critical thinking that is made up of ideas. While words are not the same with concepts, it is safe to say that concepts are made up of words. Here we will meet our first philosopher, John Locke. He is a British empiricist. According to him, all things that exist in the world are particulars. For an instance, you took a handful of sand, and I am here to say that each bit of sand is a particular. Now, I want you to name each sand and give me the list of their names. It is impossible, right? Not only that, it looks like there is an infinite amount of it, but it's also not practical to spend time on something that literally sounds and looks impossible. This is where general terms will come into the picture. According to Locke, general terms were invented because it is impossible for every particular to have a proper name. Thus, the name sand and other general terms to acknowledge a group of particulars. That's also where abstraction will enter. It is the process of using general terms in naming a group of particulars. On the other hand, we have general idea. It is the characteristic common to a group of particulars. For example, my handful of sand. What is the thing in common between the particulars or every bit of sand? They are rough, right? Also, they come in different colors, but when they are in group, they come in color light brown. So that is the general idea of a group of particular. Now that we've mentioned it earlier, we have terms. Terms are verbal means of expressing what we know through concepts. There are two kinds of terms that will be tackled. First is the simple terms, which are terms made up of a single word. For example, cat, dog, coffee. On the other hand, we have complex terms. Complex terms are made up of several words to represent a single concept. For example, Lord of the Rings, Guardians of the Galaxy, The Chronicles of Narnia. So those are the complex terms and simple terms for examples. Moving on to chapter 2, which is extension and intension of concepts. There is a consensus among philosophers of language that every term expressing a concept is analyzable from two aspects. First, you may identify the kind of things that are members of the domain of the concept, which is the extension. On the other hand, we have the set of characteristics or traits shared by members, or the intention. Let me give you a good example to illustrate the philosophical use of the terms. The extension of the concept bat denotes to all individual animals regardless of size, shape, or color. Even if some bats are small as a human thumb and others have a wingspan of several feet, both are members of the extension of the concept of bat. However, if our analysis will stop at the extension, we will not know the nature of all bats. Now, for its nature, you have to shift your analysis from extension to the intention of the concept. Example here. For our concept, we chose music. For music, we have the extension, or under extension, we have the music genres. We have indie, country music, and R&B. Equal to that is the intention. Intention includes all the characteristics that these extensions share. For example, they all have tune, of course. They all have lyrics. They all have singers or producers. So that is the basic example of how extension and intention works. Next, we have essential property. It is a possession of a single trait that is necessary and sufficient condition to qualify one to be a member of the extension of the concept. Most biological classifications of plants and animals are based on an essential property held in common by the member. We have different classifications like amphibians, and our example here is for mammals. Mammals have one thing in common, which is a mammary gland. Without mammary glands, an animal cannot be a mammal. It is amusing that whales, platypuses, and elephants are mammals. Aside from mammary gland that they have in common, it seems that they share no other observable characteristics. So we have here the essentialist belief in philosophy. They believe that for a concept to be meaningful, the intention of the concept should be limited to essential property only. So we have here another philosopher. We have here Ludwig Wittgenstein. He is an Austrian-born British philosopher. In his book, Philosophical Investigations, Wittgenstein challenged the essentialist view that for a general term to be meaningful, there must be an essential property held in common by the members. He cites his famous example of games. Here, Wittgenstein enjoins us to consider numerous games like board games, card games, ball games, Olympic games, and so on. And then he asks, what single characteristic or trait is common to all these games? Wittgenstein explores some possibilities. He ponders, is there always winning and losing or competition among members, among players? Is there always amusement or enjoyment among players? Here he quoted, don't say there must be something common or they would not be called games, but look and see whether there is something common to all. For if you look at them, you will not see something that is common to all, but similarities, relationships, and a whole series of them at that. To repeat, don't think, but look. And when you actually start looking and seeing, you will not find an essential property held in common by all activities we call games. Instead, we will find multifarious relationship. This is where family resemblance will come. In short, family resemblance are complicated network of similarities. The intention of concept games forms a family of traits, characteristics, and functions. Moving on to Module 3, which is using the same language. In this unit, after studying, we should be able to describe how a word acquires meaning, distinguish ambiguous and vague concepts, avoid useless verbal controversies, and apply a cardinal rule in critical thinking. The cardinal rule is essential and we must always keep that in mind, especially when we are conversing with other people. So we have here, philosophers agree that a word takes on a meaning through the way in which people who belong to the same verbal community use it, either orally or in written form. When asked about the meaning of a word, Wittgenstein's reply was, "For a large class of cases, though not for all, in which we employ the word meaning, it can be defined thus. The meaning of a word is its use in the language." Let us begin from the beginning. What exactly is Wittgenstein's theory of meaning in terms of use? I know that you are familiar with numerous ways of using words. You know that a word can serve as a name of a person, place, or things. Words can combine usefully in a sentence to express a command, a wish, or an intention. Words can be used to ask a question or offer an explanation or state a fact. Now that you have an idea of the numerous ways in which words are used, all these uses for Wittgenstein are meaningful. In this case, I want to add that Wittgenstein frowns on artificial use of language, which in his judgment philosophers are fond of doing. Terms like sense, data, or data, substance, ideas, and the absolute are used so artificially by philosophers in their language game. To be sure, there are examples of language games that the philosophers play, but they have no form of life. This means that language games are unplayable by real people in real life situations. Thus, if a language game is unplayable in the sense above, the language game has no form of life. Also, as an example for this phrase or this sentence, Wittgenstein suggests that to determine the meaning of a word, for the word for instance, you have to identify how the word is used in a particular language game. In one language game, it is used to refer to a rodent. On the other hand, the word refers to an instrument that players use in a game called baseball, the baseball bat. Similarly, the word cold can refer to the weather, or it can refer to the disposition of a loved one. Again, the word difficult is often used as a description of an exam, or in another use, it can describe the predisposition of a person. The uses of words in ordinary language are overflowing with similar examples because almost all of them have more than one use. Also, according to Wittgenstein, to understand the meaning of a word is to understand how it is used in a given language game. To share a language game is to share a form of life. So, meaning to say that most people who share day-to-day lives, most people who share the same genes, the same place where they came from, have the same language game. And with that, as a product of that, they share the same meaning of different words and they understand each other better. To provide explanations, we have here 3 uses of words. First, we have conventional or standard. Conventional or standard use of word is the norm or the meaning that is widely accepted. This is the word that generally used by many individuals. For example, we have here father, mother, brother, family. So we have that common belief, or we have that common thing that we use those words with the same meaning or in the same language game. Next, we have ambiguous. In some cases, a word may acquire many different uses in different language games. Thus, it becomes ambiguous. In our national language, the term loob and hiya have so many linguistic uses that Filipino philosophers thought that deciphering the nuances of the various uses will reveal a Filipino philosophy. So, how about you? What are the ambiguous words that you know? And what are the meaning or the different meanings that you can think of it? Moving on, we have the word vague. Vague are words that have unclear meaning. The terms some and many are used so loosely in many language games that it becomes vague. Now that we've discussed the 3 uses of the word, I want to ask you something. Have you been misunderstood before, given the fact that you are talking to someone who uses the different language game, or in simpler terms, someone who didn't understand what you were pertaining to say? If so, I advise you to follow the cardinal rule. What is cardinal rule? Here we have the cardinal rule. Never take part in any discussion or verbal dispute unless you are sure that both of you are using words in the same way. So this is where most common misunderstandings start. By following the cardinal rule, I believe that this is the best way to avoid useless controversy and even misunderstanding. Moving on to the fourth and last module of the Unit 1 that I will discuss, which is the classification of concept. Here we have 7 different classifications or categories that is readily available. To be sure, this classification is not fixed or given once and for all. New categories in the future may evolve, but others might disappear too. So first we have empirical concept. Here in empirical, what can be observed in the real world? That's simply it. The members of the extension of a concept can be observed in the world, then the concept is empirical. To simplify terms, everything that is tangible and visible is empirical. In addition, the trait, characteristics, and functions that members must possess is also observable in the same way, tangible and visible. Next, we have analytic. Analytic concepts are those entities which cannot be found in real world. In simple terms, it is the opposite of our first concept or first category or classification of concept. In simple terms, analytic concept is the creation of our minds. A good example that I know you are all familiar with is the concept of number. Numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on to infinity are all abstract concepts. Number 1 is a set with 1 member. Number 2 is a set with 2 members. Number 3 is a set with 3 members. Number 4 is a set with 4 members, etc. But what about 0? Well, it is a set with no member. As an analytic concept, the members of the extension are not empirical objects like tables and chairs. Next, we have evaluative. It is the judgment of the worth or value of a person, act, etc. Evaluative concepts cover a whole range of concepts. We have the moral, aesthetic, and even the religious one. Concepts like good or bad, right or wrong, moral or immoral fall into the moral category. The concepts like beauty and ugliness are under the aesthetic, and the concepts of heaven and hell are under the category of religions. Legal concepts like guilty or not guilty are also evaluative. Evaluative concepts again are our judgments of the worth of a person or value of a person, act, behavior, event, place, etc. Moving on to the next page or the other half of the classifications of concept, we have fictitious concept. Similarly, the intention of fictitious concept is also clearly delineated, but we know that the members of the extension of the concepts are purely imaginary. For example, mermaids and unicorns are some of the fictitious concepts that we sometimes believe. Fictitious concepts are not bad per se. In fact, in mythology and fairy tales, they provide a unique source of entertainment. So, for the meaning of a fictitious concept, it is purely imaginary and a source of entertainment. Even now, I still enjoy watching science fiction movies on TV programs. What is misleading is when fictitious concepts purport to the empirical while in fact they are not. Ghosts, tikbalang, muno sa punso, and manananggal are good examples of fictitious concepts pretending to be empirical. Because some Filipinos believe such entities exist, they seem to lie in between the fictitious and empirical concepts. I myself like fictitious concepts, especially when I'm reading novels and alternate universe or a work of fiction where writers are using real persons' names and photos, most especially the showbiz personalities, and they are creating an alternate universe for those people by giving them different names, different personalities, and even different partners. Moving on to dispositional, we have here dispositional. Dispositional concepts. They exhibit severe observable trait only if certain operations are performed. You might be surprised to know that there are hybrid concepts that come from the sciences. Some of them are called dispositional concepts like elastic, magnetic, temperature. These concepts do not designate a directly observable trait or characteristic that members must have, but they exhibit this observable trait that only if certain operations are performed. For example, to determine if an object is magnetic, we have to perform certain operations like putting some iron fillings near the object, and if the fire of the iron fillings adhere to the object, then you know that the object is magnetic. The operation constitutes the definition of dispositional concept, as you will discover later in this module. Next, we have theoretical. Entities that cannot be readily observed to exist in time and space are known to be theoretical. Again, these concepts are present in science. Most scientists speak of theoretical entities or theoretical constructs. Such entities are observable only through the use of very powerful sensory extending devices like the electron microscope. Nevertheless, the tentative posit of their existence is necessary for a scientific theory to be available or to be promoted or functional and become a research. Moving on to the last concept or classification of concept we will discuss is the metaphysical concept. In metaphysical concept, I have heard Sir Kalika mention this during the discussion prior to this meeting. I have put this as the last concept or a last classification because metaphysical concepts assumed the center stage in many philosophical systems. A good example is the concept of substance like God, mind, and matter. For instance, the intention of the concept mind is to describe as follows. It is an entity that is fundamental. It is immaterial. It has no weight, no mass, consequently it cannot be located in space. It does not exist in space, yet it is believed to exist in time. It is also indivisible and cannot be divided into parts. It is also eternal, and so it cannot be destroyed unless destroyed by God. Nevertheless, it is believed that the mind interacts with the body. Another very interesting metaphysical concept offered by the idealist philosophers is called absolute. It is characterized as a universal mind, and as such it is composed of the totality of all minds, past, present, and to come, together with all their ideas. And so we are all part of one reality, the absolute. Moving on from metaphysical, or now that we have discussed the 7 classifications of concepts, we are moving on to the intra-intersubjectivity tests. Let us first define individual tests. For intrasubjectivity, it is when I can identify and re-identify something whenever I want to. It revolves around myself, or from your perspective, it revolves around you. However, if there is another person who wants to see and to believe or to actually revisit, re-identify something, they will need to pass the test of intersubjectivity. It is when other person can also identify and re-identify something whenever they want to. For the extension of the concept to be empirical, it must pass both tests, which is intra-intersubjectivity tests. When something does not pass the intra and intersubjectivity tests, the entity is fictitious. For example, I have a favorite thing or object, and that thing behaves so irrationally that even I could not see it or touch it whenever I want to. Then, that thing is completely or totally fictitious. It cannot even pass the intrasubjectivity test because even I cannot see it or touch it. In short, for an entity to pass the intrasubjectivity test, I myself must be able to observe the entity anytime I want. So in order to pass both exams or both tests, we must first pass the intra or the tests that have something to do with ourselves. For the last one, we have here intra and intersubjectivity or subjective consensus. If members of an extension are not directly observable through the unaided senses like naked eye, like the sense of smell, hearing, but through the use of sensory expanding apparatus like the use of a simple light microscope for observing microbes or the use of a radio telescope for observing a black hole, the belief that microbes or black hole exist is established through the intra and intersubjective consensus of community of scientists who are experts in the field. It happens when something is or is not observable through naked eye. For example, the community of scientists of whatever nationality, culture, language, creed, race, or sex can come to a consensus regarding what is or what is not observable through their sensory extending devices. Their consensus sets up the intra and intersubjective support for the existence of theoretical entities in the sciences. The best example is the demotion of the planet Pluto into an asteroid. The old consensus that lasted for more than 70 years claims our solar system consisted of 9 planets. These consensus have been revised recently by experts in astronomy, and now we have only 8 planets. How long this new consensus will last, nobody knows for certain. This example exemplifies the nature of all empirical claims. Their truth is only contingent and never certain. So that is all for today or for this video. I hope you learned something, and if ever that you will have other questions that concerns these topics, you can reach me through Messenger or even through my UP mail, which is attached the last part of the handouts that I have given. And so that's it. Thank you for listening. I hope you had fun learning as much as I had fun creating this presentation and as well as this video. So I will carry this over to the next presenter that will present the module 5 and 7 of Unit 1 of Acuña's book, Philosophical Analysis. Thank you!